Hello, everyone. I extend my warm greetings to all the attendees present here. On behalf of the Biology Society, I, Sonali Manath, the head of events, welcome you all to today's webinar titled as The Arctic is Wailing. Are we listening? The Biology Society, or TBS, is a global student community that aims to provide a common platform for all the biology enthusiasts. Our members are engaged in various biology-related activities and events. To know more about our society, you may check our website. And to join our society, you may fill up our membership form. If any of you is interested to talk about your topic of interest and give a webinar, you may register as a speaker. All the respective links will be put up in the chat box shortly. Our speaker for the day is Dr. Suma Sarojini, who is currently working as an associate professor in the Department of Life Sciences, Christ Deemed to be University, Bengaluru. She holds a PhD in biotechnology with CSIR fellowship from Rajiv Gandhi Center for Biotechnology. Although her main research interest lies in bacterial genomics and microbial biotechnology, she is highly passionate about the concept of sustainable environment. She has been highly involved in spreading awareness about the need to save Mother Earth by writing petitions, newsletters, providing courses, and collaborating with international NGOs like Parvati for Marine Arctic Peace Sanctuary Project, in short, also known as MAPS. She has been nominated as one of the Global MAPS ambassadors by the NGO to propagate the cause of saving Arctic and getting public attention. It is an honor to have you with us, ma'am, and I extend a warm welcome to you. The audience can post their questions in the chat box, which will be addressed in the end of the webinar. With this, I would like to hand it over to our speaker for the day, Dr. Suma. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sonali, for those kind words and introduction. Am I audible to all of you?
Yes, ma'am, you're audible.
Okay. And thanks a lot, Reshmi and Niharika, for inviting me for this talk. I'm always happy to share whatever knowledge I have, especially with youngsters like you. Okay. As Sonali was telling, my main domain is not environmental science, rather it is microbial biotechnology, but I'm slightly passionate on this cause because I know how much we are disturbing the environment and we very badly want to do, we have to do something. And I feel that youngsters like you, rather than old people like me, can contribute to saving this environment. Okay, so hence I want to create more and more awareness to what lies ahead, okay, mostly in your lives. So without further ado, let's get started. All of you can see my screen, right?
Yes, ma'am, it's visible.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, fine. So you don't have to guess much. The first question is, what are the air conditioners of our planet? Okay, so as I've told you, there's no guessing because in the topic itself, I've told you that it's nothing but the poles. Okay, so what will you do if you want to cool a little bigger hall is you put two ACs on two corners, right? So then your room will get uniformly cooled. So like that, our mega planet, our Mother Earth, is cooled by the two huge polar ice caps. One is the Arctic and next is the Antarctic. Now, long before the humankind ever walked on this planet, there is millions of years ago, these polar ice caps were keeping our planet cool. Okay, so this didn't happen overnight. Millions of years back, this started. But as you all know, it is melting at an unprecedented rate now. I hope all the audience who's sitting here would have heard this in some of the other lectures before. The polar ice is melting, both Arctic and Antarctic, huge chunks of ice is melting and sea level rising and all those things. But this is expected, but what is alarming is the rate at which the ice cap is melting. So the predictions go like this: Arctic would be ice free as early as 2030. It's already 2021 now. So if we don't act fast, you can always say later, like once upon a time, we had something called Arctic. What I want to stress in today's lecture is whatever is happening in the Arctic region does not only hamper the Arctic ecosystem, it will have its toll all over the globe. Now, again, just to tell you that, or just to show you how much sea ice is thinning, what I've shown in the picture there is that light blue is the sea ice estimates 1980, and you can see by 2006 itself it has been kind of halved, and this is 2006. Okay, now 15 years have gone, so now it's even much lesser, maybe quarter of this only we have. And what they observe these days is every year summer, when the Arctic Ocean, huge part of the Arctic Ocean will be melting every summer. So in summer, there is only 75% less Arctic sea ice than we had just 40-50 years back. So what I want you all to understand is what is happening there, that melting is at an unprecedented rate. Now, geologists often call this phenomenon as a death spiral. Most of you will know this, but I'll just try to explain. Basic physics, if you know that white surface reflects, right? So when you have this huge polar ice caps in the Arctic and Antarctic region, 50% of the sun's heat is reflected by this pristine white ice. Problem is, once this ice starts melting, it's replaced by this darker waters, right? Water is dark when compared to ice. Problem is, absorption of heat happens. So otherwise, sun's radiation would have gone back to the atmosphere. Now a huge part of it is being absorbed by this water. Then what happens? This will again increase the temperature of the Arctic waters, and again it will further melt more ice. So this is called death spiral. Geologists call this as death spiral. So the more ice gets melted, again it will induce the melting of more and more ice. Now, you will be wondering why I'm telling you only about Arctic region, because you have to know a little bit of the geography of this region. You all know this, and just highlighting this. If you compare Arctic and Antarctic regions, both are of course at the poles, but Antarctica is a whole big continent, whereas Arctic region is primarily an ocean. Only thing is that it's a huge part of it is composed of ice. And if you see the land masses, you can see that Antarctica is very far off from the maybe nearest civilization, so to say. And can you see the green parts which I've indicated? The land masses are all very far from Antarctica, and it's a very icy, hostile planet, Antarctica. Whereas the Arctic region, if you see, it is very close to several countries like Canada, US, Russia, Norway, Sweden, so many, not Sweden, Greenland, all these countries surround the Arctic Ocean. Now, this proximity of all these countries itself is a way into the Arctic, because that is causing the destruction of Arctic region. Now, a few years back, this particular study was published in Geophysical Research Letters. Now, I think all of you know that scientists estimate the sea ice thickness. Earlier picture also I showed you one with the dimensions of the sea ice. So over the years, what happens is they found that sea ice is becoming lesser and lesser. This estimate they get from satellite images. But 4 years back, a scientist called Vishnu Nandan, he's basically from Kerala, so he's a polar researcher, he found that these estimates are a little bit skewed in the sense they didn't account the satellite images, they are not accounting the salt content in that water. So to cut the long story short, the estimates of sea ice are even, I mean, whatever estimates we had, it is little skewed, and actual sea ice thickness is much lower than the estimates. So in short, Arctic will be ice free earlier than the estimated timeline. Now, this is the person, Vishnu Nandan. In fact, he was the only Indian in a biggest Arctic expedition called Mosaic Expedition. And this was in a huge ship called Polar Stern. It was in 2019-20 that time. So he is he was the primary author and the lead author of that particular Geophysical Letters paper. And that paper stirred the scientific community so much because they were expecting the Arctic to be ice free by end of 2030 or so. But the thing is that it will be much earlier than expected. So in this context, the recently held summit like the COP26, it matters a lot. And I think the detailed reports and all of COP26 will be coming. But the summary of it is all the countries which participated in COP26 agreed that we have to keep the rise in temperature to 1.5 degrees Celsius. somehow all the countries agreed that we have to cut down the emissions so that global temperature rise will not go beyond this 1.5 degrees Celsius. Okay. Now, what are the repercussions of this crumbling Arctic ecosystem? I think even high school or even standard 6 standard students will know that there will be global sea level rise because of huge masses of ice melting in the poles. This will lead to habitat loss of polar bears and other animals in that particular ecosystem. One thing which recently scientists have started exploring is it will cause permafrost to melt. What is permafrost? It's any earth material which is below 0 degrees Celsius. Okay. So you see huge acres or hectares of permafrost in the poles. Now, what is the problem if permafrost gets thawed? Number one, there are large quantities of methane which is trapped in this permafrost. As you all know, methane is a greenhouse gas. Okay. Now, this greenhouse gas, which is a major greenhouse gas, carbon dioxide comes to our mind, but the contribution of each unit of methane is much, much more than each unit of carbon dioxide. So single unit, if you take, methane contributes more to global warming. So lots of methane deposits are there in this permafrost. So till now, for maybe 10,000s of years, it was lying in frozen condition. So we didn't have anything to worry about. All of a sudden, permafrost is starting to melt. This will release a lot of methane into the atmosphere. What is the net result? Again, global warming. Okay. Another danger associated with this permafrost melting is it can reactivate deadly viruses. Now, you all know pandemics which has happened in the previous centuries. Now also we are in the middle of a pandemic, but maybe not as deadly as the ones we had in 1920 Spanish flu and all, because at least very soon we were able to develop some medicine. But what you should remember is that even in this century, so many lives were lost to COVID-19. Now, I hope 1920 Spanish flu, all of you know that. And then before that, plague had claimed so many of citizens' lives in different countries. So all these pathogens, now it's not there, but the remnants of this or this dormant forms of this bacteria, virus and all will be there in this permafrost. So by thawing this permafrost, we are unleashing all these pathogens back into the atmosphere. And some scientists have started studies on this. Till now, this was not a major problem. Only in the past decade, scientists started seriously studying about these things. What are the repercussions of melting permafrost? And they found that DNA viruses, like the smallpox, have much more chance to get reactivated than RNA viruses because they are a little more fragile. Now, these are huge craters which were formed because of the permafrost melt. Can you see how huge it is? From all this, methane will be released in the atmosphere, contributing to the global warming. Another problem of this global warming is the coral bleach. Okay. Again, I think I saw in your biology society that earlier you had a talk on ocean acidification, right? So that scientist would have told you more about it. But those who have missed it, I just want to tell you that one of the effects of global warming is ocean acidification, because more carbon dioxide, if it is there in the atmosphere, it will get dissolved in the water also, in the seawater. And then carbon dioxide plus H2O, you get carbonic acid, which will acidify and bleach the corals. So most of you would have seen very beautiful pictures of corals, and you all would have heard about the Great Barrier Reef of Australia. So all these beautiful structures will be bleached. It will just look like cement. I've shown a picture here. That's all because of the increased levels of carbon dioxide. Now, I hope if you all remember your school geography, can you tell me which is the predominant gas in the atmosphere?
Nitrogen.
Yeah, nitrogen. What's the percentage? It is 78%. Okay. Next comes oxygen, which is 21%. So together, nitrogen and oxygen itself claims for 99%. So remaining, you have 1%. Who can tell me which is the next important gas? Anybody can tell me which is after nitrogen and oxygen, which is the most predominant gas? Don't search
Carbon.
No.
Is it carbon?
No.
So oxygen.
No, I told. Now first is nitrogen, second is oxygen. So together it's 99%. Anybody wants to try, or else I'll tell? Okay.
The noble gases?
Which one? Yes, argon. Why argon? Anybody have an idea why argon? Because that's relatively stable. Okay. Other gases like helium and all are there. Again, why noble gases? Because they won't react much, right? So helium is also there, but the problem is helium and all will go off into the outer atmosphere. Whereas argon, it's relatively stable and heavy, so it tends to stay more in the atmosphere. Okay, fine. So argon is the next one, that will around 0.99 or 92% or so is argon. So next comes carbon dioxide. If you remember, if any of you remember the percentage of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, which most of you would have studied in school, that is 0.03%. 0.03% is equivalent to 300 ppm. So we all studied that, at least I studied like that in my school. I don't know whether school textbooks changed now, stating it to 400 ppm, but we crossed. It was a very bad day. In May 2013, we crossed this 400 ppm mark. Now, any of you know what is meant by Keeling curve? What I've shown as a graph is a Keeling curve. That is nothing but the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. From 1958, religiously, in Hawaii, there is an observatory which measures the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and keeps in this graph that is called the Keeling curve. Now, scientists had long back, they had warned that we should not allow the carbon dioxide concentration to go beyond this 400 ppm. They had issued several warnings, but countries could not control the emissions, and finally we crossed the 400 ppm in 2013. That was 9 years back, and sorry, 8 years back. And now if you see 19, 20, 21, and now it's on the rise only. It's not at all coming down. This will lead to ocean acidification. In fact, this has destroyed almost half of Australia's Great Barrier Reef. Now, when there is huge melting of Arctic ice, it is going to increase the temperature of the Arctic waters also. So that is going to alter the ocean current patterns. Now, what is the problem if ocean current patterns change? It is flow of water. You would have studied about Coriolis effect and all those things. I'm not going into details of that because I am not a geologist, but understand that this will alter the ocean current patterns. That again will change the wind pattern, rainfall pattern, weather pattern, everything. And I hope all of you know that crops or cropping rather is dependent on the weather. So if the climate pattern changes, the cropping is also going to take a toll on it. Okay. Now, these kind of news is there in the media all the days, not only I should tell years, all the days almost now, because you are seeing extremes of weather. When the polar ice melts, floods and droughts are on the rise, and it will definitely hit the low income countries, especially people living in the coastal area, because even if they affect the high income countries or developed countries, they have resources to fight it. Whereas the poor countries, especially ones in the coastal areas and all, will be highly vulnerable. And predictions go like this: by 2050, over 50% of global population may be living under water stress. Severe droughts. Some countries will have excess floods also. Some countries will have excessive droughts. So all this climate instability will lead to crop failure. You all know that even now crop failure is rampant because because the rainfall pattern has taken some wrong patterns, in the sense that when the crop is about to be harvested, you have heavy rains, so everything will be gone. This will lead to hunger crisis. So heating planet ultimately will mean a hunger crisis. Now, in 1995, there was a study showing that even the Earth's poles are kind of little bit drifting because of the huge melting of the glaciers, because these are huge masses. If you see the weight of it, if you try to imagine, it's huge. So the polar drift is a phenomenon by which this melting of glaciers has caused a slight eastward shift in the position of the true North Pole. So earlier, what was the true North Pole? The shift was caused because of the rampant melting of these glaciers. And scientists have started observing it from 1995, and it is going on at an alarming scale. Now, I think all of you, when you hear the word Siberia, you often think about some cold, ice-filled or snow-filled place, right? Can you imagine in June 2020, a Siberian town recorded 37 degrees Celsius? Okay, so that's like a Kerala or Kolkata climate, right? 37 degrees Celsius. So 100 degree Fahrenheit, when you translate or convert, it will become 37 degrees Celsius in June 2020. This is unprecedented. Maximum temperatures earlier in this town and all was maybe around 16, 17 degrees. That's what I've read. But first time in its history, it went up to 37. Now, This slide is shown because I want you to understand that whatever is happening in the Arctic region will not cause havoc in the Arctic, but elsewhere. It is going to change the number of wildfires in places like California, Australia, Brazilian Amazon forests and all. It is going to dry out the Scandinavian hydropower. In some areas, there will be too much of rain. In some areas, there will be dry spells. Okay, so all this will cause so much of havoc. So disruptions in the Arctic worsens all these events and is predicted to be much, much worse in future. Who can tell me what this is? Anybody?
Dragonflies?
No, closer, but not dragonfly.
Locust attack, ma'am.
Yes, locust attack. Okay. I think last year you would have heard in news, right? In Pakistan and Iran and all, you had so much of locust attack. Now this locusts are, even though it is an insect, they congregate, they come in huge swarms. So when they come in swarms, no, swarms means millions of insects, okay? So they just come, and if they sit on a wheat field and spend 2-3 hours there eating up all those things, when they fly off, it will be like a barren ground. So that much voracious feeders are the locusts. I'll tell you why am I telling about locusts here. But understand, you can't underestimate locusts. These locust plagues are very, very important as floods and droughts in human history. If you see, these are the 3 major natural disasters which has caused serious agricultural and economic losses and human lives throughout the history of mankind. So equally important as flood and drought, you have locust plagues, because it will eat off all the crop. You will not have anything left in a matter of 2-3 hours. And if it's 300 insect, 3,000 insect, you can do something. What will you do when a swarm of 30-40 million insects come to your field? It's very, very difficult. So this is the kind. Can you see the tree is swarmed by the insect? And now specifically this locust, it's very resilient. Okay, the eggs especially, if they'll be laying these eggs in the soil, it can lie in the soil for some time. Not that it has a fixed time to hatch, and it can lie there dormant. I mean, I'm not telling for years and years and all, but it can relatively lie there for some period till environmental conditions are favorable. So when more rains and all come, no, they'll hatch very fast, and up to 3 generations per day. And these swarms can fly as long as 150 kilometers a day. And their voracious feeding habit goes like this. Like one swarm itself can devour about 200 tons in a single day. So you can imagine the damage inflicted. Now, why I'm telling you all this is climate change has an effect on this locust attack. Okay, has a role to play. In 2020 summers, what happened is in the East African continent, where the Kenya, Somalia, that belt, lot of locust eggs were in the soil, but there was an untimely rainfall. Now, because of this untimely rainfall, so many of these locust eggs hatched simultaneously. Even otherwise it would have hatched, but it hatched simultaneously. And all this formed huge swarms, and they started flying across the desert. So from Africa, it entered the UAE region and all. And through Oman also, there were similar desert-like regions where you had locust eggs. That also hatched, and newer swarms were there. All this formed a super swarm, and they flew into Asia. So that's why a lot of areas in Iran, Pakistan, and some parts of India also, I think Gujarat, Rajasthan, that belt also had this locust attack. Luckily, we were able to drive them off, but otherwise it would have eaten almost all the crops. Okay, you can't do anything. Okay? You will be helplessly watching. And this is not directly our topic, but I just want to tell you that scientists have been studying this reason for this congregation behavior of locusts. And one reason they found was there is a hormone called 4-vinyl-inosole, which is responsible for the aggregation. This was published in Nature in 2020. This is an offshoot, I'm telling you that. So cool our world to stop the locust swarms, because as I've told you earlier, you should not underestimate the locust swarms. They can just rip your agricultural fields barren. Now, I think as I've told you earlier, the recent decades saw all this extremes of weather: hurricanes, wildfires, floods, frost, and even now you're seeing, right, the Chennai floods. Then 2 months back, you had 2-3 months back, Europe floods, China floods. Everything was like extremes. And hope all of you remember the Australian fires, right? It started off like wildfire, but across the continent of Australia, north, south, east, west, everywhere you had wildfires. Not, I should not tell wildfires, forest fires, because it was entering even the residential areas and all. So if you see, no part of the continent was spared. This was also because of extremely dry weather, because of rampant rainfall and all. Rampant means it was not coming in the proper time. Some other time too much of rainfall was happening. So because of this erroneous nature of the rainfall, so much of dry spell was there, which in turn contributed to this much wildfires. Even otherwise, Australia and wildfires used to happen, but not at this rate. And estimates go like this: 500 million animals were burnt alive. So you should imagine 500 million, that is more than 500 million. These are estimates. Maybe things could be more. I mean, the actual total could be more. This is the recent China floods. With all the infrastructure, they also couldn't contain the floods. This much damage had occurred. This is, I think all of you would have heard about the Germany, Europe floods, especially in Germany, some parts of, not full Germany, some parts of Germany. And people say that this was unprecedented in the past, maybe 100 years or so. They have never seen this kind of floods. Okay, so that is what I meant by extremes of weather. Now, if you try to see the damage caused because of this, due to this Australian wildfires, you have economic loss, you have biodiversity loss, and you have habitat loss. And these are all to the tune of billions of dollars. Now, I just want to tell you about habitat loss. Of course, you will understand that animals will be losing their habitats. Now, biodiversity loss, I just want to comment on this. See, you suppose if some 100-acre forest is burned, and you had a specific flora and fauna there earlier. Do you think that after 10 years, if nothing has happened there, will it grow back to its original biodiverse flora and fauna? No, it will never come back because of the burned soil and all. It will be a totally different kind of plants and animals. Of course, at least we can bring them, but plants, they will never be the same composition of biodiversity as they had earlier. Okay. Now, this is again just to show you the enormity of the extreme weather conditions which happen these days essentially because of the Arctic meltdown. This was Hurricane Florence. I think it happened in US in 2018, I guess. And this was the enormity of the storm. And even from 400 kilometers above, they had to use a very wide lens to capture this. Okay? Otherwise, they were not able to capture it. That much huge was, or enormous was this Hurricane Florence. Now, this just to show you the losses due to these extreme events running to billions. See, developed countries, at least they'll be able to save human lives. But poor countries, they'll not even be able to save human and animal lives. Okay, so developed countries, mostly it will be economic damage. Now, to tell you about the hurricanes, in fact, 2020 was really a stormy year in India. I hope all of you know this. Some of you would have been near the place where the cyclones had happened. You had Amphan, Nisarga, Nivar, all this happened in 2020. And these were all major cyclones. And what you all should understand is, India, we were not that much prone to this kind of huge cyclones earlier. Once in a while, we'll get that zip. Areas like, or countries like Japan, US and all, periodically they'll get it. So that's like an endemic thing there. Okay, so every year they'll get lots of, this is cyclone prone area. Cyclone, tsunamis, earthquakes are nothing new to Japan. The thing is that they'll be prepared for that. If you have it every year, you can construct your buildings in that manner, a safe manner, all precautions you can take. But we are thrown out of balance. Okay, we have all this phenomena more in the past decade. Earlier, we didn't have this much. Sorry. Now again, 2018, 19 and all, we had all the cyclones, just to show you that the extreme weather conditions has been on the rise in our Indian subcontinent of late. Now, for those who are curious about the naming of cyclones, In the Bay of Bengal, Arabian Ocean, and Indian Ocean, the names of cyclones are decided by 8 countries, okay, who are there in that particular locality. These 8 countries are India, Pakistan, Oman, Myanmar, Bangladesh, Maldives, Sri Lanka, and Thailand. The first cyclone which India had a chance to name was Agni in 2004, and the last we named was Vayu. So you would have heard about this Nisarga and Amphan and all. Nisarga was named by Bangladesh and Amphan by Thailand. Again, offshoot. If you are curious, I just wanted to tell you about this. Any of you can tell me what this is? Have you seen this picture anywhere?
Svalbard seed vault.
Yes, yes, Svalbard seed vault. Where is it?
It's I think in Norway. The region is controlled by Norway.
Yeah, region is controlled by Norway. It is in the Arctic region. This is a archipelago. It's an island in the Arctic region. It's not attached to the Norwegian landmass. It's little away, but the Norwegian, as you rightly told, Norwegian government controls this. This is like a Noah's Ark. What you are seeing is only the tip of that iceberg, I should say, only the little part of the seed vault. Can you see the location of the seed vault? And I want you all to focus on the landmass, Norway, Finland, all these places. And it's little far away from Norway, but controlled by Norwegian government. So in this particular island, it's a remote island, no other buildings and all is there. And the temperature will be minus 15, minus 20, or even winters, it will be even lesser than that. So there they have built a seed vault. What was the intention is, it could act like a long-term seed storage facility to act as a precaution if at all any disasters happen, natural or man-made disasters happen elsewhere. This will be a safe place to store the seeds of all the crops. So in fact, this represents the world's largest collection of crop biodiversity. Different countries, India also, we also have put our samples of rice, maize, groundnut, whatnot. So many of our crop samples, I think 500 gram or something like that, each crop you have to submit there. So they will store this. So if at all everything else is piped off also, you can get it back. It acts like a gene bank. Now these are some of the pictures. This is how they store the seeds. Some sample will be there in the test tube, and little more, maybe half kg seeds of each particular variety can be given there, submitted there. Now in that picture, I have labeled as 1. That is only the initial part which I showed you in that slide before. And when you go inside, you have a huge tunnel, and after the tunnel, the rectangular places which you are seeing, there they will store the seeds. Now, why I want to tell you is that about this Svalbard seed vault is that people thought that this is a very safe haven for the seeds. Nothing will happen because temperature is minus 18 degrees Celsius. So even if something happens to a power failure, total power failure, also nothing will happen. No seeds will decay. Everything will be safe. They have 10 lakh seed varieties from different countries stored there. So people thought this will be the very, very safe place, but even this was threatened by climate change. Now, I think 2018, they had some floods in that Svalbard seed vault, but luckily water didn't enter into the area where the seeds were stored. It was only in the tunnels water was there. Okay. So nothing happened to the seeds, luckily, because as you saw in the previous picture, there is a long passageway before the long tunnel before they reach the place where seeds are stored. Because of that, nothing happened to the seeds. But now people thought that this is like a Noah's Ark and very, very safe, but even that is threatened by climate change. Now, what is causing this much damage to the Arctic? That is because Arctic is being commercialized at a very, very unprecedented rate. And who is commercializing, doing this commercialization? That's what I wanted you to, I told you, first when I showed the map of Arctic region, Arctic is surrounded by so many countries. So every country will have their vested interest. Main thing which lures them to the Arctic is oil. Lot of oil is there in the seabeds, okay, ocean beds. So they want to tap the oil. Now, you all know that whichever country produces more oil, they'll be very rich because the whole world needs oil. So all countries are greedy over this oil business. So they want to make their claim over the Arctic Ocean beds. So they will send the ships to explore whether the ocean beds have oil. This will, burning of the fuel will cause blackening of ice. This ice will kill the marine life. This will cause global warming, and the whole Arctic system will crumble. Like this, huge vessels will cut through the ice. You have to have something called icebreaker. Then only you can pass through. With the solid mass through that, ships cannot pass, right? So you have to break the ice first. So breaking the ice again will heat up the water. All this toxic fuels. I mean, when you burn the fuels, all these toxic fumes will again increase the temperature of the waters and melt the Arctic ice. Another important thing is what they do. What this oil companies do is they will do something called seismic testing using air guns. They'll shoot to the ocean beds, and this is done to test whether the oil is present or not. So in this picture, you can see the air guns being continuously shot every few seconds. You can imagine this is the sound of this air gun is too much. It's like rifle firing and all. So all this aquatic life is constantly being bombarded with this sound. Even though it may not kill it directly, it will alter their behavior pattern, their feeding pattern, mating pattern, everything will alter. So the entire aquatic life in the Arctic is also going haywire because of this. So the Arctic ice isn't just an Arctic problem, it's a global emergency. Okay. So as the ice melts, more businesses want to profit from this open waters. So that's what I told you. Antarctica, nobody will venture that easily because it's very, very hostile condition. Antarctica, for most part of the year, the weather will be extreme that you'll not be able to survive there. Only in the summers, Antarctic summers, at least little bit of scientists and all will go there and do some research and all. But otherwise, it's a very, very hostile condition in the Antarctic region. So then Arctic is little more, countries have proximity towards the Arctic region. So they all run towards the Arctic region to get the oil and all. But that is not what we want. See, Arctic Ocean, whatever is happening, only few people will know about that because it's very, very far from all of us. So many things are happening. And in fact, there were so many cases, like some companies, initially they had given them permit to drill oil and all. Even after the permit is invalid, some will not go. So some activities are going like that. And the case will go in one direction, and by that time they will drill maximum oil. All this is happening, and it's a multi-billion-dollar business. Okay. Now, this is what I want to show you, just to show you that so many countries are close to the Arctic region. And of course, our Russia, then Canada, US, everybody is claiming that Arctic is, so many parts of Arctic is theirs. Of course, with Norway and Finland and all very close. Which country's flag is this?
Norway.
Russia.
Russia, very good. It's Russia's flag. You know where it is planted? In the sea. Okay, this is underwater. So this came, I think, recently, 2-3 months back, I guess. This picture was, I mean, we had this. I saw this picture of a Russian flag being posted in the seabed to claim that it is their territory of the Arctic. Okay. So every country they will claim that some part of the Arctic is theirs. Okay, so to establish the claim, they have not even left the seabed free. This is one picture of Russians claiming that the seabed is theirs, and this is one of the submarines. I saw in news. I thought it will be interest you. So having said all these things, can we do something? Sitting very, very far away from these places, one person cannot do anything, or maybe 10 people cannot do anything, but as a collective mass, we can at least try to work for this cause. So there is a this Marine Arctic Peace Sanctuary. This concept was actually started by an activist called Parvati. She's actually a Canadian musician turned yogini, and that is why I think she would have taken the name of Parvati. She's a musician, and she has started this campaign. So this is a treaty in the UN to protect the fragile ecosystem, Arctic ecosystem, mainly to tell that we should not allow any commercialization in the Arctic and say a strict no to commercialization. So whoever is coming to Arctic with those vested interests of commercialization should not be allowed to exploit the Arctic resources, whether it is oil, whether it is killing the animals, whatever. Now this is that Parvati, and So it's high time we protect our global air conditioners for a healthy planet. And if we take action now, it will not only protect the Arctic, it's going to protect the whole world. But that takes a lot of effort from a lot of people. So what you and me can do is, at least there are some petition signature drives. And if you go to this parvati.org, this particular website, you can just sign a petition. More number of signatures they get, they have more voice when they submit it to the UN. Now, as I've told you, I try to work for this cause, and we have been conducting some campaigns. I write newsletters. I've written 1 or 2 articles also in journals for this cause. And this is one such campaign we conducted in Christ University. And we got, in a single day, we got 600 plus signatures, petition signatures. That is just for the first drive. Then after that also I've conducted few drives. So what was once a planet's air conditioners, they're turning into simmering kettles, especially the Arctic region. And the clock is ticking, but the choice is yes. When you stand up for the Arctic, you're standing up for our entire planet Earth. So I urge all of you, if you are for the cause, it's not mandatory. If you feel that you are for the cause, you can go to this particular website called parvati.org and you can sign the petition digitally. Okay, so let's try to bring some peace in the Arctic region so that this extremes of climate will be at least not increased. Okay, we can't just drastically bring it down. That will not happen overnight. So thanks a lot for listening to me. And I just want to leave you with this slide. I hope you can see this. Thank you. If you have any queries, you can ask me, or later on, if you have any queries, you can always contact me this email ID.
Thank you so much for that, ma'am. Wonderful presentation, eye-opening, seriously. I request all of you that we'll have the Q&A session soon. And before the Q&A, I want to have a photo session, a small photo session. I request all of you to switch on your cameras for the same. Ma'am, I think we can stop the presentation.
Yeah, I'll stop the presentation.
So that
No, it's coming. One second. I can't see the stop sharing. Now?
No, it's fine.
no, it's fine, ma'am.
It's okay, no?
Yes, ma'am. Okay. Hi, everyone.
I don't think it's possible to turn on the cameras because the host has disabled the camera.
I don't think so. It's actually switched on.
That is
The permissions
what
are
it
on.
says when I'm trying to start the camera. It says that the host has switched off the camera.
Oh, okay, 1 second. I think. Did you get any permission now?
Start my video has come. Okay. Yeah,
Okay.
now it's there.
Thank
I'm
you
a
so much.
old sir of Suma's, so it's wonderful to see her perform.
Oh, I saw you just now only, sir. I thought you won't have time.
So it was very great.
Thank you.
No. That is all the time for you. And I was just looking around. The evening yoga time was there, but then this is far more important than that. And it was nice to know about Parvati. I've heard about her, but I didn't know that she was into the Arctic saving thing. Okay.
Few years she's into it, sir.
Yeah. So you are presently totally into this, or have you left your subject and are you into this now?
No, sir. No, sir. This is my subject is still biotechnology only. But then
I was
feel
thinking
that I have
biotechnology is quite far away from this. So I was thinking, like.
Yes. What I do for my give my MPhil PhD students are all totally different. So that's why I told them first itself, taking a bail that this is not my primary domain, but I want to educate this, especially the youngsters. They should know more because they are going to face the vagaries of this.
No,
So
it's really, really very good that you have taken up the thing. It has been a lot of people who are aware of this has been talking about it for the past 20 years, but nobody is concerned. It's not about just about Arctic. The other thing is about the population increase, about the number of children we are bringing into the earth and how the earth is not able to sustain the life forms that is coming up. A lot of things are there. They're very alarming.
Too much pressure. Yeah.
Yeah, and that is the reason why all this is happening. You can see what's happening in Kerala now. So much of floods are happening and people are rendered homeless. It's very sad. It's nice that you have taken it up because you can as well be just a teacher and, go about with your life. So it's wonderful. It's very great that you're doing it. Yeah.
Thank you.
I feel very
for
proud.
the others who are clueless about
I had the opportunity.
What, sir, if you had the opportunity?
What is that?
You're about to tell something, no? If you had the opportunity?
Yeah, like I too send these things to many people. So now that you have said this about the maps, I think I'll send that also to. It's a nice opportunity to interact with people around the world. There are many people, many groups which I know. Not that I'm regularly on them because of my thing into spirituality, but this is also very important. You can't just run away from this. It is something that is going to happen to all of us.
Face it, yeah.
Not to all of us, at least to the children.
Yeah, so that's what I want to do, sir. In my own humble ways, I want to educate the younger generation about the possible danger lying ahead in their lives. Whether you like it or not, it's going to happen. And for the others who are clueless about what is happening between me and Gokul sir, he was my professor in my BSc, my mycology professor in Kerala Agriculture University, Department of Plant Pathology. So I had sent him the link. So thanks a lot, sir, for joining. I thought you won't have time.
No, I saw your status update. Actually, I don't look at many of these status updates which people put about their personal life. So this is something, usually you put something different. And your name is coming as Govindaran. So that's your
that is
son's
because
account,
just now my son finished one Zoom meeting. I didn't get time to change. I was about to change, but then I saw that.
No, it doesn't matter. It is quite nice. You're both the same. It is you in him and he in you. So it's okay. Then I won't take more of your time. It's okay. Others also might want to interact. So it's okay. I'll join the maps thing and do that. Okay.
Thanks a lot, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, so students, shoot questions. Whatever I know, I'll tell you.
Ma'am, there are a few questions in the chat box. I'll read them out for you.
Yeah.
Tejas asks, what methods are used to measure the thickness of ice caps?
Okay, so Tejas, I told you first I took a bail that I am not a geologist, so I don't know much. But what I do understand is, based on satellite images, they have some calculations. based on the image, and that's where this brine comes into picture. Earlier, what they were thinking is or what they were trying to calculate is based on the fact that water comprises this entire ice mass. Then that researcher whom I told you about, that Vishnu Nandan, he found that, okay, this is not correct because nobody is taking into account the amount of salt in that ice. So this is all about imagery, geology. I don't know geology much. So only thing I know is that the calculations which they had done earlier were wrong. It was a little bit skewed, or they had flaws in it. So based on this, when they recalculated, they found that, say, for example, earlier estimates showed that 1 meter sea ice was there. Now with the new calculation, they found that only 0.7 meters is there. So which means that we don't have that much sea ice as predicted, which in turn means that we are going to lose this sea ice, or Arctic will be ice free at a much earlier date than the earlier predictions. Okay. Tejas, I think I didn't answer your question properly, but that if you want, I can connect to Vishnu Nandan and get a proper answer for you. But because I was not a geologist, I didn't bother. Also, I knew that somebody will ask this question. So that's why in my presentation, I told you that I am not a geologist. Okay.
Yeah, sure, ma'am. Thank you.
Anybody else?
There's another question by Niharika. By what ways were the locusts driven off?
Okay, now see, spraying things and all will not work much. At least there could be, you can't kill the insect just like that. What they were doing is, if the locust has already come to a field, you cannot do anything. They will just devour the entire crop. What they do is, they will predict, scientists will be predicting where the next attack might be there. So there they might add some repellents and all. Okay. So that way they were driving off. I don't know where it went actually. I don't think everything was killed, but thankfully they went to some desert area or something like that. That's what I read. It's very difficult. Once they come in the field, how much will you spray? What pesticide will you spray? It's difficult. See, 100 insects, what I told you, 100 insect, 1000 insect, you can do something. But much more than that, it's very difficult. And what the entomologists will know better, that is those who study insects, there are other ways to curb the population by giving something which will prevent the mating and laying eggs and all those things. Okay, those kind of pheromone interventions and all can be done. But other than that, once it comes in a field, it's very difficult to do anything. That's my understanding. It's very difficult to get rid
I
of
think,
the
ma'am, recently, even in case of mosquito, using biotechnology, they have developed a strain. So exactly, I don't remember how exactly it works. But
so what they have done is, all this is disrupting the life cycle and making male mosquitoes infertile. These are things which they try to do. So when this infertile, they make, by genetic engineering, they make this male mosquitoes infertile. So when they try to mate with the females, you will not get fertile eggs, right? You will not be able to get the eggs. Future generation you will not get. But the question with all this is, you can do all these things in the lab and release a few mosquitoes. How are you going to control the entire world's mosquito with that? So did you understand what I'm trying to say?
Another thing is like ecological concerns as well.
Because, and we don't know, like Frankenstein will be releasing some monster, so we'll not know about that also. So anything when we are tampering with nature, you have to be always cautious because we don't know the repercussions. Long-term studies or long-term effects, we'll never know.
Yeah.
There have been
even there are like few ethical, ecological questions that are considered while using biotechnological engineered organisms, or say crops. Like take the classic example of BT cotton or BT brinjal. Usually people are against using it.
That's because see, problem is that what I've read is that BT cotton, initially everybody was happy because it killed that cotton bollworm. See, I am a biotechnologist per se, I should be advocating, but I should tell the facts, right? So the problem, what happened is, that time bollworm, or the cotton bollworm, Heliothrix samujara, was a major pest of cotton. Now what happened is, because of rampant cultivation of BT cotton, some other minor pests, which were very, very minor, like chotus we'll call, no? So those never used to cause any real damage earlier. They became major pests now. So now what is the problem? We have to sit and make a genetically modified crop for that pest, which was earlier minor, now major. So all that, see, try to live with nature. If you are greedy, all this problem comes. There is one book by a Japanese scientist, I think One Straw Revolution, something like that. Name of the book exactly I forgot. So he was advocating that you don't invent that hybrid crops and all those things. You do natural farming. You do mulching. I hope you would have heard about all those things without much chemical fertilizers, pesticides, and all. I think One Straw Revolution is the name of the book. A Japanese scientist. If you are interested in that, you can read about that.
Yeah, but biotechnology has a far more potential in like helping humankind with enhanced medical services and all. Like, so usually what preferable fields are, yeah. So that's why like we might be keen towards like using biotechnology for other as well. So that's what we are seeing nowadays.
Yeah, especially in the field of medicine, biotechnology has gone leaps and bounds and very, very beneficial. Otherwise, it would have saved, not would have, it saved the lives of many people. Classic example is penicillin. I mean, not penicillin, insulin. Otherwise, how many would have died because of diabetes?
Yeah.
So we should adopt. I'm not against technology and all, but don't madly go after technology alone. Yeah. Anybody else? Sai Teja.
Yes. Yes, ma'am. There is one question by Albert. Overall, are wildfires good or bad for the environment? Because on one side, I heard that it's good since it helps in recycling the carbon, nitrogen, and other minerals in the ecosystem. But it also does cause an increase in air pollution.
See, it definitely is bad because it's going to wipe off that entire flora and fauna of that particular locality. Okay. So it helps in recycling carbon, nitrogen, and other minerals. See, of course, when everything is turned into ash, right? So ash will be there, but the problem is that you are destroying the soil. You are destroying, because of the toxic fumes and all, you are destroying the air. Then the entire biodiversity is gone. So definitely it's bad. And the thing is that once it starts, you can't control it. In controlled conditions, if you're doing something, okay, at least. But these are uncontrolled things. So it will never, we can't stop. You would have seen, Amazon rainforests and all, they were burning for months straight. So it's not good at all for the biodiversity.
Thank you, ma'am.
Those were all the questions that we got from the chat, ma'am. If anybody has any questions that you directly want to ask, ma'am, you can do so.
Yeah, they can shoot. And I think Karen, thank you for attending. Karen is working for MAPS. I had sent the invitation to her also. So hope I did justice, Karen.
It was wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Suma. And thank you everyone for going to parvati.org and signing the petition. It's very, very helpful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Can you give like more information about like MAPS? What are like your short-term and long-term goals? How exactly it's working?
Yeah,
it would be great to know.
Yeah, I mean, so much of what Dr. Suma talked about, for oil and gas moving and, the melting of the permafrost, all of that is a big concern for what's happening in the world. Global temperature rise, sea levels, ocean acidification. MAPS is basically protecting the whole Arctic Ocean from all of that. So it's saying the countries around the world, we need 99 countries around the world to sign the MAPS treaty and say we cannot allow that to happen. And once the 99 countries sign on, then the UN, it becomes law at the level of the United Nations. And basically that whole area will not allow military, will not allow oil and gas, will not allow all those things. It does allow scientific research. So that's really the long-term goal. And we need to do it so quickly because as you see, the situation is very urgent and it's very dire. And so we're definitely working with governments and talking to them and the UN, but we also need grassroots. We need people around the world to see that, okay, this is a problem. I need something. And the first thing you can do is sign the petition and show that, okay, I can at least do that. You know, I can tell the world that this maps. So please go to the website. There's a lot of information there. And Dr. Suma, I actually want to share with you, we have a scientist letter now. So you know how a lot of scientists are speaking up and saying, you know, the science tells us this, you know, the government has to listen. So we actually have a scientist letter now that I want to share with you and for you to share and circulate with your departments. We're aiming for 20,000, at least 20,000 scientists to sign, and we're bringing that to the UN as well. So I'm actually putting the website in the chat. It's signmaps.org, and you can go there and look at the scientist letter. And if you are a science, like if you're you know, a science student and a master student, PhD, whatever, you can sign as well. And we've had signatures from every part of the world already: Asia, Africa, North America, etc. So I really hope that that's something that you can support as well.
Sure.
Yeah,
This is
that's
something
great.
close to my
So
heart,
what-
and I'll do whatever possible to work for the cause. Though, as I've told you, my domain is completely different, and my professor was wondering what am I doing here in this particular domain. But see, anybody can spread awareness, right? Though I am not an expert.
Exactly.
Yeah, but I take a sustainable environmental management. I've written journals, articles in journals. I've written newsletters, and I've written in newspapers in India. I think I've sent to you, right, Karen?
Yes, you sent us the
Spread
article
the word.
you published in, I think it was.
Second Herald.
Yes, that's right. Yes. Yeah.
See,
and
these are small things I try to do so that I can spread the word. Now it's a duty of all of you sitting here to further spread this word to your colleagues, teachers, students. And one more thing, we were, Karen, I think last year, because of this COVID, no, we had so many disruptions. Otherwise, we had planned to go to some schools also. Because of COVID, only just before COVID, we had gone to one school and we had conducted. And in 2-3 colleges had gone and have given this talk. So let's try to do a little bit.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, yeah, COVID has disrupted everything. But, you know, the sad part is you think, okay, COVID has, you know how in the beginning of COVID, people were saying, oh, people are not driving as many cars, there's less pollution. And I remember reading, I'm in Canada, by the way, so just want to make sure people know. And I was reading these news headlines saying, oh, you know, the pollution in Delhi was so much less, and people can see the Himalayas and things like that. And I thought, oh, that's cool. The sad part is, despite COVID, the shipping, so the amount of ships going through the Arctic, tourism in the Arctic has not slowed down. That's the sad part. And we know from the recent COP26 conference as well that, you know, CO2 emissions are going up. They're not really going down. And we're, you know, if we do not do more, we're not going to meet our 1.5 degrees Celsius target. The world has already warmed 1.2. It's actually quite alarming, you know, that our world has already warmed 1.2, and the Arctic is warming at least 3 times as fast as the rest of the world. So we really have to stop this, and we really have to start by protecting that area that's like our air conditioner and saying we cannot allow the exploitation to happen. Yeah.
And I can see a question by Sai Teja in the chat box. See, thing is that because of the dead debris and all, methane is being trapped for thousands of years in this permafrost. So it was harmlessly lying there in the permafrost because it was frozen and we didn't have any real danger. Now that the permafrost is starting to melt, all this trapped methane gas is coming out into the atmosphere. Okay, so just because it is being it's getting melted, everything is coming into the atmosphere, and the power of individual methane molecule to increase global warming is much higher than that of carbon dioxide. I think 25 times higher also, something like that I've read. So methane is really, really dangerous.
Yeah. And
As dangerous or even more dangerous as carbon dioxide. Why people tell about carbon dioxide is that is there more because of all these emissions and all those things. Carbon dioxide is more, but per unit, methane does more damage.
but it's also like you showed the picture of the methane eruption, you know, the big crater.
Great.
You know, when it erupts, it actually spreads all these bacteria, like you were saying, smallpox, and there's actually smallpox, anthrax, Spanish flu. It's all within the permafrost. So you can imagine when it explodes and it releases all of these pathogens into the atmosphere. And we know from COVID that one pathogen in one place doesn't stay there, right? It will travel all over the world. And it means that we could be, you know, starting future pandemics, because nobody here has any immunity against smallpox, because when we were born, you know, smallpox was already eradicated. So there's so many concerns about the warming of the Arctic permafrost and the melting of the Arctic ice. And like you said, we don't know the long term, but we know enough right now that we have to stop the trajectory. We have to stop what is happening. And the way to do it is not through engineering, because there's only so much we can engineer. We don't really fully understand the technologies, and we should just leave nature alone for it to restore the harmony and the balance within that ecosystem.
Karen, thank you so much for that, because from sharing information to sharing that petition, because at least we know that even if you're sitting so far, we can do something for the better world. And your opinion about the pandemic just blew up my mind, because I just did not know that we were seriously right now constructing our next pandemic in one way.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing is people just think, oh, it's the ice. I'm really far, like you guys are in India, and you're seeing the issues with the locusts and the flooding. I remember a few years back, you know, there was a lot of flooding in Kerala, and, you know, just the heat waves and everything. But it's like what starts there doesn't stay there. It happens and it will affect the whole planet. And it's sad because, you know, there was a question about how if we do what the COP, you know, COP26 is saying, all the promises and the pledges, is that enough? And the answer is it's not enough. So the COP just finished, and even yesterday there was an agreement to reduce coal, like our use of coal. And I know that in India there's a lot of controversy about coal and everything. But we also need to remember that there are other ecosystems around the world that need protection and that can have a huge impact. And protecting the Arctic Ocean is one of those ecosystems. If we protect that area, we can really limit carbon dioxide rise, methane release, pandemic risk, and global, you know, just global temperatures. So it's like it addresses all of these issues in one thing. So it really can make a huge difference.
Thank you so much for that. I think if nobody has any questions, if there's any further questions, you can still ask or unmute yourself. Until then, so I think we'll end the Q&A session, and the link for joining the TBS and the feedback form will be put in the chat box. The attendees are requested to fill the feedback form for any kind of suggestions, appreciation, or comments. I would like to thank our speaker, Dr. Suma Sarojini, for this eye-opening presentation and sharing her knowledge with us. Also, on behalf of TBS, I would like to thank Karen for all the information that she's provided us with. Last but not the least, I would like to thank all the attendees for making this webinar a successful one. Have a great evening all.